Like, I really wish managers and people higher in the industry would take young bands and put them in some kind of like business class, or make them start savings accounts or investments and things to like really look out for their future beyond just like what next tour they're going to go on and things like that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Record Process. We have an incredible one in store for you. We have a great conversation today. Our guest is musician Mr. Cody Votalato, and we talk deeply about his newest music project that goes by the name of J.R. Slayer. We talk about the highs and lows that come with pursuing a music career, and we follow his story all the way back to his tenure as guitarist for the Seattle-based post-hardcore band The Blood Brothers. He opens up to us about his writing process and finding genuine inspiration for the songs on his newest EP. Cody talks about why these songs are so important to him, both personally and as a musician, trying to build a non-toxic relationship with music and rediscovering the power of eliminating expectations of success when it comes to creating meaningful work as a songwriter. He explains his thought process behind teaming up with producer Will Yip and even bringing in Ben Walsh of Tiger's Jaw to help him take these songs to the next level. And he also explains what it felt like when he realized they had done just that. So many of the albums that we'll be highlighting this season on The Record Process share one very important theme. And that's the idea of technology helping musicians and creators overcome the collaborative restrictions that once came along with geographic location. Thanks to companies like Audio Movers, real-time remote audio production and the tools that make it possible are more powerful than ever. Their groundbreaking Listen To plugin allows you to stream, record, and collaborate on high-quality audio in real time and is used on a daily basis by world-class audio engineers and professionals at places like Capitol and Abbey Road Studios. Their new Pro plan allows you to stream up to 150 users simultaneously, includes custom branding, and even allows you to stream MIDI data in real time. So head on over to audiomovers.com and enter the code RECORDPRO to get 1 month free off your Pro membership today. So as you already know, we do a lot of talking about the creation of original music here on The Record Process. I mean, that's kind of our thing. But it can also be fun to put your own spin on an old classic and tell the world something else about yourself through something like a cover song. Cover songs can be a really interesting way to connect with your existing fan base, or even a way to put yourself in front of new audiences through shared musical tastes. And our friends at DistroKid have made it super simple to upload a cover of your favorite song while allowing them to handle all of the back-end licensing work that can really be a headache for independent artists. DistroKid will notify the composer and publisher of its release, they will pay the necessary licensing fee, and they will take care of all the other legal red tape involved with releasing a cover song on a streaming platform, allowing you to fully focus on enjoying the process of putting your unique artistic spin on that recording. If you're already a DistroKid member, you can access this as you're uploading your track for $12 a year per song. Or if you're not yet a member and you'd like to sign up for DistroKid, you can use the link in our show notes to get 30% off of your first year's membership. Cody Votalato, welcome to The Record Process. So nice to have you. How you doing, dude?
Good, really good. It's really nice to be here. I'm stoked. Yeah.
We are as well, as you probably can already guess, because you've made some music throughout your career, my friend, that has consisted of a number of bands and a number of projects that I know a lot of people are. You got some fans out there of this stuff, and you might just be staring at a few of them. It's our great pleasure to have invited you on. And you were so gracious to accept to come talk about the newest venture in that canon of work, your project J.R. Slayer, and the EP that you put out called Not Rotten.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to dive in. Obviously, that's what we do on the show, right? We're going to get into the weeds, all all the good stuff. But I would love for any of our listeners that might not be familiar, kind of with your origin story, as it were.
Yeah.
Maybe let's start
I'm
there.
like an X-Man.
Yeah, exactly. You got a ton of superpowers, right?
Yeah.
Let's just start by adding a little context and color and backstory to this for everybody, because I think it's important,
For sure. So when I was 15, me and some of my friends in a suburb of Seattle, Washington, started the Blood Brothers, a band that we were in for 10 years. That band split up, started another band called Jaguar Love. Meanwhile, had another side project called Head Wound City with a bunch of cool people. Did some touring, guitar playing work for Telekinesis and Cold Cave. Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Produced a few records for a band called Shut Ups, a band called Dude York. A lot of stuff. Music has really kind of been a centerpiece in my life, even though the last 5 years or so it hasn't been. So that's been the kind of fun thing about JR Slayer recently, is that I've been doing it for a number of years, but it's only like kind of started to become something a little bit more of a focus recently.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. And see, I told you we were not lying. A prolific creator in the music creation space, right? So you've had a hand in a number of different projects over the years, right? Obviously, Blood Brothers, a very interesting one. If for some reason you're listening to this and you have not yet checked out that catalog, go do it. It sets the stage for a lot, but also I think it is a really interesting juxtaposition to where you are now, specifically with this project, right? And so the name of the project, obviously, JR Slayer, right? So I want to dive in. So that kind of brings us up to now, but you mentioned, and I think this, this is an interesting point. The last couple years has been a little bit less so focused on it. And now this project is kind of coming back, coming to the forefront even more. Can you talk to us about that and what brought you to the doorstep of putting these songs into play and really, galvanizing this EP?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of the origin of the project actually goes back to almost like 2012 or 13. I was working with Pat Monahan, who's the singer of the band Train in Seattle. He had like a little home studio, and somehow my name got put in the hat to maybe like be an engineer or like someone to help him demo and write. And I just met with him and we hit it off. And so I just like started tracking demos with him. I kind of pretended I was better at engineering than I really was, because I really had only ever just used Logic on my computer and never really recorded a vocal. And I kind of just, I think between like us just getting along, and I might have oversold myself a little bit on my capabilities, but I ended up working in the studio with him and writing with him. And I just started learning so much about more kind of traditional songwriting that I'd never done before. And really, I just ended up having a ton of time in his studio because he would go on tour and it was just like mine. And I wasn't in a band that was touring. I didn't really have a lot of direction at the time. And so I just spent a lot of time in the studio kind of messing around and coming up with ideas and making songs that became like the very first JR Slayer a couple years down the road, the JR Slayer record. And then I still didn't really do much with it. I moved to LA in 2016, didn't really have much going on with it. A friend of mine heard some demos and was like, you got to put a band together. So we put a band together and like started playing some shows in LA. And I was like, okay, cool. This is fun, because I really I had a toxic relationship with music for a long time, trying to put the pieces together after like Blood Brothers and Jaguar Love split. And, we weren't bands that built a life savings. We were working bands, were small, so it was like money was tight. And that time in music was weird because you weren't really like prepared for it never to end. There was like this lie, I think, that a lot of musicians believe when they're young. It's like, oh, this is awesome and this is going to be my life forever, and I don't need to plan anything beyond that. Like, I really wish managers and people higher in the industry would take young bands and put them in some kind of like business class or make them start savings accounts or investments and things to like really look out for their future beyond just like what next tour they're going to go on and things like that. I know that's a bit of a tangent, but
No. This is great. Yeah.
That's actually an amazing tangent, and I'm gonna take the bait and just put a pin in that, Cody, because I think that's really important, and I couldn't agree, especially being multiple decades into a career myself and thinking back to like what my like the band started out as a joke, right? But I've heard that story from so many friends, acquaintances, and people over the years that you cross paths with, right? And I wonder, and I always think the same thing, and that's why I think it's so important, even if you're just like you come in, and nowadays, like with the potential for huge viral swings and shift and careers, or I should say livelihoods, built overnight if something takes off on a platform, right? I think there's a lack of longevity in the philosophy and approach to a lot of those things, and that is one thing that I think gets left on the back burner is how to structure that both creatively but also personally, because I think what happens is things like burnout start to creep in, right? And then you start to time scarcity, financial scarcity at a different point in your career. There are going to be peaks and valleys, but it never seems that way when you're just heading up the mountain, and that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, especially when you're young too. Yeah, you're young, everything's exciting. There's no, and I was even kind of smart with my money when I was in the Blood Brothers, because we never made a bunch of money, but we started touring a bunch, and I just stayed living at home with my folks. Like it was fortunate that like they had a place. So when I would come home, I would, for whatever week or two, I would stay there, go crash with my sister in the city. And I ended up saving up a bunch of money, and even like I invested a little bit of it. And I remember when the first market crash happened, I lost like a big percentage of it. And then I was like, got freaked out. And then when the band broke up, I just like lived off of it. I just kept pulling out of it. Like that's the part that like I wish that I had had more like schooling or teaching or foresight, because if I had left that in there, it would have done what it was supposed to do from the beginning. And instead I lived on it while we were trying to like make Jaguar Love, a lucrative project. And then it was just gone. And, and like, I feel like I was even a little bit more like prepared than some other people. And I still just like did not handle it properly. And it's such a drag.
And you are not alone by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to things like that. And I feel like the idea of creating a buffer, if you can, it keeps circling me. And I think it's so important for creatives, if possible, within means. Sure, like that's not always the story that gets written, the hand that gets dealt, right? But if there's a means to it, and you can, whether it be in the way you use your time, the way you structure your time, schedule your time, or the way you see an income come in when expenses are low, maybe think before you buy that jet ski after album one, right? Things like that. But specifically, I think, going back to the longevity thing, man, it, when that burnout and when things do get stressful, I think all of those things can tax, kind of the inner creative and your ability to kind of get yourself back to a space where you really thirst to make stuff and make stuff honestly, right?
I was gonna say that was actually what happened with J.R. Slayer. Is I was so burnt on trying to make money playing music, and I not succeeding. And then I just kind of just stopped doing anything really. And then I was thinking about it. I think I watched that show, The Get Down, on Netflix. I don't know if you guys ever saw that. But it was about the beginnings of like hip hop and graffiti. And it's just, I mean, it's really like kind of cheesy, but it really like something about it made me want to connect with music again, like the same way that I did when I first started playing, and just really got to thinking about it. And I was like, what was different when I was young and first starting to play was like, I didn't have any future investment or monetary like goal in mind with any of it. And so I just decided I'm going to start writing songs, recording them in my bedroom, and releasing them with nothing in mind, and it's in a attempt to reconnect with music, because obviously I think it's not obviously, but I believe it's the thing I'm best at in the world, and it's the thing that's probably most important to me, outside of my wife. You know what I mean? Like it's the most
right.
like,
Shout out to the wife. Shout out the wife.
Yeah. But I think it's just the most like at home place I am, and I really wanted to reconnect with that and make it something that I felt that way again. And I also thought I would make something better. Felt like I could really only make something more authentic and original if I wasn't thinking about whatever, how many people would come to the show, or if anyone would like it, or if I would make money and pay my rent doing it. And so that's really the first few years of me doing the band, was all just that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Recording in my bedroom,
Dude,
figuring out the artwork myself, like sorting out TuneCore and Stem, and kind of just putting it out there, playing shows from time to time.
that's so amazing. And I think what you're talking about, Cody, like what I kind of hear and what I recognize, even in a lot of artists that I work with and that Tom worked with, and I'm sure you've worked with other artists too. I think they're, especially in the age that we are now, where it's like there's such an empowerment towards independent artists, and like everybody gets thrown the DIY ethic of like, if you're not doing it all yourself, like that can be a lot of pressure in itself, but also very freeing because there's so many good tools out there, right? The one thing that I marvel at is I'll sit there and I'll be coaching like a younger independent band, and some of their gripes, or like, they wish that they're like, man, if I didn't have this day job, and could focus 100% on this, I feel like I'd make better art. And I always think about the fact that it's like, well, that might be true. There might be some truth to that. But at the same time, there's such a vast list of artists that made the best art when they had that financial stability, because there were no like expectations, driving them, and they were able to make their best work, because the second it kind of flips the script and it's like, oh, this is the quote unquote day job, there's a lot of it, like that everything else that you cared about and really started to ponder on a deep level starts to get washed away with like the feedback, the metrics, and then the internalized expectations. But some of that for independent artists that aren't doing it always like, full time on the road grinding, almost are a little bit pushed back from that, and can still make some great art, right? And so I love that, because that is something that like, obviously you're no stranger to making music, right? But it was like, you were doing it in that way, very independently, and very just for the sake of making the music, not as a vehicle to sustain, and I love that about it.
Yeah, and I'm actually currently living proof of what you're saying, because I planned it, but I took the last 6 months off work to kind of dedicate time to it. I really tried to take many steps to kind of not fall into the more toxic behaviors around it, because as soon as you set your expectations and then maybe not as much stuff comes through as you want, or like you said, the metrics or the analytics don't like look a certain way, it starts to get like mess with your head a little bit. And I certainly found myself at times struggling, being like, what the fuck did I do? Like, why did I do this? Like, this is stupid. But what I did learn, and what I knew going into it, is that I wanted to take time to put into giving the thing some legs and putting some roots down for it that maybe I wouldn't have been able to do had I been working at my job, which is a very demanding job time wise. So in a lot of ways, this has been a nice learning experience of something I already knew, but also like giving me really good perspective on like what actually works for me balance wise in my life, and what I think like is going to be able to make the project have longevity. Because you're right, you can just sit and stew. You know what I mean? And there's, especially now in music, it's hard. It's more the Wild West than I think it's ever been, even for very well-established acts. I mean, I know that you, like, Wonder Years are doing a lot of touring right now, and I'm sure you have tons of obstacles that make it hard for you guys, even though you like are very well established. And, you know, I mean, that's an assumption, but a lot of my homies that I talk to, like, that it's a struggle.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think, you know, when you talk about struggle, it's kind of a relative game, right?
Right.
I think that's what's important to remember too, is that, you know, it's very easy to get carried away with the kind of a grass is always greener, you know, look at the world and
100.
at your career, right? You know, and the reality is that, yes, like there are struggles for us, you know, touring these days, you know, at the age we are, but you know, it's relative, and I wouldn't expect anybody coming from a different perspective and a different place in life to necessarily understand some of those, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you have to be careful about that, and you also have to remember, and I try to remember that it doesn't matter what you've done in the past necessarily, that it's very easy for that self-doubt to creep back in. As artists, as creatives,
I
I think
know.
that's the battle we'll grapple with,
Yeah.
regardless of how much, you know, quote unquote success one has had in the, you know, in the past. I mean, I go back to like an idea of like, you know, on a podcast recently, they talked about Michael Phelps winning like, you know, a gazillion gold medals. And he talks about that time in his life. And they were like, that must have been the best time. He's like, actually, it's the worst time because I no longer had anything to work for. I had like all the gold medals. What do I fucking do now? You know, like
Right.
that's that
Yeah.
self-doubt to being like, is this all I am? Is this enough? Why doesn't it feel like enough? Am I flawed? It's all of that packed into it, man. But if you can, you know, and you're going to wake up and see that and greet it every day, right? You know, but if you
Yeah.
can get through it to just say, hey, this is meaningful. This will be meaningful to someone. This and find those whys and that reason. I think that's what you're talking about, and that's what this EP is, and these songs are for you, right? And I love that. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
The releases that you previously put out, they were all self-recorded, self-produced, and yeah. So this EP flew out to Philly, right?
Yeah.
To track,
Yeah.
with Will Yip.
With
Will.
Spend some time with our boy. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. The one and only.
So could you walk us through, I guess, like, even before we get into the tracking of it, like getting into like that decision of taking it outside of your bedroom and like going into a studio?
Yeah, well, it definitely wasn't a decision that I made. It was kind of like, how the hell did this happen? Because, like I said, it wasn't something I was pursuing to do for, you know, I obviously was always open to any opportunity, but Jason Klein, who plays bass in the band with me, he and I were roommates, and him and Will were friends, and we like had only kind of been playing together for like a little while. And this was, I think, like late 2019, early 2020, like just before COVID, like shit went down. And he had mentioned many times, like, I gotta send this to my friend Will. Like, I think he would dig what's going on. And then he's like, I'll just do it right now. And so he like texted him, and then within minutes, Will responded and was like, what is this? This is awesome. Like, we should record. Because I think that they probably, because of their professional relationship, always wanted to do something creatively together. And Will really like took to the songs. I think it was the Little Mirrors EP that I had recorded and put out. And I was kind of like, what the hell? Like, hell yes. Like, I would love to work with the producer, because I was doing everything on my own just because I figured out how to do it, and I knew how to do it. And I was like, oh, I have these tools. Like, I can start the song just from scratch, record it, write all the parts, program all the drums, and play all the synthesizer, and I can do everything. But honestly, I never, actually, that's not true that I never enjoyed it, because there is a part that I really enjoy of like building out a piece of work and starting it, and, you know, kind of doing everything on it and feeling like I've accomplished this. But eventually I'm just kind of like, this just sounds like one person doing the same thing over and over. And for me, I really welcome the idea of someone helping me and being a part of it. And because I think that the only way to create something unique is to have other minds involved, truly. Not that it can't be done, but I think the best things are made with groups of people and different inputs and influences and expectations and motivations out of playing music. So I was really open to the idea of working with Will. And also just his pedigree was like, like this guy wants to work with me. Like this like little band, this little band that's done nothing. Like, hell yeah. So we started like kind of texting and talking in early 2020. And then I think it wasn't until like July of 2020 that Jason and Will and I had like our first Zoom call to kind of talk about like what we want to do and when we can do it. And then we didn't end up having our first actual session until November of 2020.
Oh, okay. If you're an audio engineer or musician that's dedicated to creating and releasing new music consistently, then you already know that process can be long, complex, and often expensive, especially while you're trying desperately not to sacrifice the type of quality that is crucial for your mixes to stand up to those big budget productions. Producer and friend of the record process, Jay Moss, has reimagined these roadblocks to quality that plague us all. With the help of world-renowned sound engineers, Jay developed an AI-based platform called Master, which offers you the ability to quickly upload your song and receive a high-quality mastered edition in minutes, all at a price point that won't break the bank with each new mix revision. The platform also allows you to easily collect feedback from clients and collaborators, and it even caters to the perfectionist in us all by allowing you to quickly compare and contrast different iterations of each track as you make those final subtle tweaks. So for a limited time this season, you as a Record Process listener can not only try Master for free, but you can also receive a 20% discount on your first membership by using the code PROCESS on their website at checkout. So hit the link in our show notes or visit maastr.io for more info. So a lot of people think that Oxford Pennant makes, well, pennants. You know, the triangular wool flag type things that usually have like a sports team's logo or the name of a place printed on them. Well, to be honest, that is what I thought too before my band The Wonder Years had the chance to work with them. Through that process, we realized just how much care they put into their beautifully crafted, iconic keepsakes that remind us who we are and why we do what we do. They've teamed up with some massive artists in the process, bands like My Chemical Romance, Wilco, and 21 Pilots, just to name a few. And they even offer custom shop orders for artists, companies, and unique events or special occasions. So please do yourself a favor and head over to oxfordpennant.com and use the code RECORD15 to receive 15% off your first retail purchase from their web store. So there was a long period there where, I mean, you know, obviously Jason working for Fender has a relationship with Will, and so that, you know, I'm sure they gear nerd out all the time, and have, as you said, probably, you know, Jason may be seeing a window for like, oh, maybe we can do this with Will, that would be fun, but also it's important to like kind of have that dynamic and connection with that. So it took a while, right? That was a long lead planning to get it done.
It took a long time. And I remember even like saying to Jason a few times, because I didn't know Will, and I was like, we're not doing this, right? Like we're not going to do it. And Jason just kept like reminding us like, no, it's just like, you just have to know Will and you'll know that it'll happen.
Yeah. He means to do it. His schedule is just crazy. No, for sure. But and that's the thing. And it came through, you know, because his heart was there too. And he heard the songs and wanted to be a part of it. And I know Will, he gets excited, dude.
He really championed it and made it happen and put his time in and invested a decent amount of money into doing it for this artist that, you know, like what's the gain for him outside of, you know, adding something special to his catalog, I would think in his brain. Like, and to me, it was a dream come true and so cool and totally worth the wait. It was funny because we were trying to figure out a good time to do it. And then like a perfect opportunity opened up because I'd been working on a television show and we were doing bubbles, like, because it was deep in COVID time, and we were shooting in Nemacolin, PA. And we were there for, I think, almost 2 months. And we wrapped November 23rd or something. And then November 24th, I rented a car and drove to Manayunk, which is like 20 miles out of Conshohocken. Is it Manayunk?
Manayunk.
Manayunk, yeah.
Where was the I mean, we could be on this tangent of how to pronounce Philadelphia adjacent suburbs for hours. That's a whole other podcast that I'm sure somebody is doing, hopefully. Deanna, make a note. We got to look that up. We got to drop that in the notes if it exists. Where were y'all filming? Where the name of that town?
You're from there, Nemacolin. It's this crazy property that the daughter of, or the granddaughter or something of the, like, 84 Lumber. She inherited 84 Lumber, which, do you guys know what that is?
Oh,
I do know what that is. That is up there. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So they have this crazy, like, hotel that's like 2 hotels on a property. There's all these houses. They have all this, like, insane artwork that's inside of it. And basically they just, because I work on The Bachelor, and they like, we were doing these bubbles where we would basically kind of take over a resort or a hotel to shoot. And it was a perfect property for it because it was massive. And so we went there and hunkered down for a few months. I think it's south of Pittsburgh. It's like an hour south of Pittsburgh or something. Yeah,
it would have to be out there because I don't think I've ever heard of it, but I know 84 Lumber, and that's definitely, man, I'm picturing like some wild, like, super rural, like, weird, like, Twin Peaks looking, like, reboot kind of thing.
It was weird. Like, the main kind of hotel was like very old school feeling, like felt old European almost. And you could just feel, like, when you walk in the place, you can just feel money, like old money all around you.
Do you think spending that kind of time, was it tough to shift gears to get into the mindset, or do you think?
No, man, I was so ready. Like, it was because it was something I hadn't done in so many years, like gone into a proper studio with the producer and like a very specific goal in mind. I was so excited, and just like, I was very well rehearsed, and just, it was, like I said, and I went to Manayunk, and then it was Thanksgiving. I spent Thanksgiving alone because Jason I think he was in Arizona with his family, but it didn't make sense for me to like fly back to Seattle where my family is. And then, so I just went there and I hung out on my own on Thanksgiving. And I don't think we went to the studio until like December 1st or something. It wasn't like that long after. So I was just like there and practicing and going on runs in the cold, and I was just jazzed. It wasn't hard to get into it at all. It's like, cool. I'm so natural in the studio. Like, I love it there. Like, it's equal to being on stage for me, like being in the recording studio in that environment. It's like, they definitely, whichever one I'm doing, I think is the one I like more at the time.
Oh, wow. I love that because I feel like it's very typical for a lot of artists to definitely prefer one over the other first. And sometimes this, it's like by band member, it's like, I hate doing the studio stuff. It's just a means to go play live, or vice versa. Or it's like, I love, like all the guys that'll go on to like do what we do and like sit in studios because they just thirst to like create and mold stuff, or like, touring is rough, whatever. But dude, that's amazing. I love that. So that comfort. And again, Will is such a warm and welcoming person as
my God.
And that space is really cool. Right there on the river. We've done a bunch of stuff there, and we could talk, and I think we probably have on other episodes, but it's an unassuming location, but a building and a studio that has so much history with someone that is Will is your greatest cheerleader, right? You're walking into a really fun environment anyway. And if you're someone that, you know, you've already sat there alone from Thanksgiving to there, having what I probably didn't look like this, but I want it to look like your own like Rocky montage moment, like jogging through Mania, but it probably did not look quite that cinematic.
No, it was a trail on the river.
Yeah. Oh, I know that trail. I know that trail. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty.
Well, that's awesome. And see, I think sometimes too, that's a nice headspace where even though it was kind of, you know, like from one thing right to the other, you did have a bit of that buffer barrier space, right? You know, so you had time to kind of probably what I would almost imagine is kind of like re-download and like kind of emotionally prepare to and get yourself excited for it. Yeah,
absolutely. Because the job that I do is really fucking hard. And I learned that on the session that we went and did. We went and shot a music video for Not Rotten and a live Studio 4 session with Will. And I really didn't give myself enough time because I worked Bachelor in Paradise, which were in Mexico for like 6 weeks, flew home. We had like 3 rehearsals each day and then we flew straight there. And I was exhausted. I just was like, it was not the best way to do it. And I think if I could go back, I would have probably given myself another week to kind of just like shed the stress of the job so that I could be fully present during the art, you know what I mean? So that's a really good point. Totally. Because I did have time to kind of like reboot, kind of get ready, like get my mind out of work and into the music.
Yeah. Ditch the rose from
yeah.
Cool. Hell yeah, that landed. Well, I knew that one.
It's Cody and then one other person listening right now. We got him on that.
Yeah.
I wonder what that like what that cross section Venn diagram cross section.
Good Venn diagram.
Like. Yeah, that's a solid one.
So Cody, so like you're in the studio, what was working with Will on this project? Like what kind of capacity did he play? Like honestly on the Bandcamp in the description of the album, you described it as like a traditional like role as a producer. Like, can you walk us through like some of that?
Yeah. So kind of like something that you touched on before about like, what were you thinking about like inviting someone else in? Like I really going into this wanted to give him a lot of free reign and put some trust into the producer, because I think that's where a lot of artists go wrong. They want to like retain their control and they don't not allowing to learn. I sent Will probably 25 ideas. Some were like kind of complete demos. Some were just songs with no vocals. Some were, you know, that nothing was finalized, but I was like, here's 23 songs from the last 10 years of me making music that I think would be good for this project. And some were like I said, old, and some were more recent. And I just let him pick. So we came in to the studio. He had chosen 6 songs and we wanted to do 5. And so of the 6 songs he chose, we tossed one and kind of just started getting into it. And like, yeah, so I immediately was open to him having whatever kind of input he wanted to have, because there wasn't, we weren't like a band, you know what I mean? We weren't a band coming in and like, these are our songs and this is our mission statement. It was kind of like, I just have all this material and I want you to help me make something cohesive out of it. So like, how do we do that? And yeah, I think, you know, and I wasn't totally sure what his style was going to be. Like no one sort of prepared me for what his vibe is or what he normally does. But I found out very quickly, because he was just like, oh, I wrote this bridge to Back When, because it was just like the 2 parts going back and forth in my demo. And he's like, what do you think? And it was like just the chord progression for the bridge of that song, which is actually probably now my favorite part on the entire EP. But I immediately loved it. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like he's writing parts and I am not scared of that at all, because it's really good. And so that's what I meant was like kind of more like traditional, because it was like, oh, he's like writing and so I would write a vocal over it. And then I think the Fade Out was a song that only had music, and he had written all of the melodies. He's like, I have these melody ideas. I want to see what you think. And I was just like, yes, these are great. And I just wrote lyrics to them. So it was like that was the first time I'd ever done something like that, where like somebody wrote all the melodies and I just put lyrics, and then it was like, oh, this is like, we're a team. So like in terms.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's straight.
Dude,
That's real deal teamwork. And what's interesting is you characterize it as like a typical producer relationship. But I think, and especially even to some of our audience, and depending on who you ask, especially nowadays, that word and job description has taken on a number of different meanings from genre to genre, or even like we talk about this all the time on the podcast. So it's funny that, because there might be some others that look at the traditional producer role as almost like a Steve Albini, like, I just make it sound good. The band is the band. I don't fuck with it. Right.
Yeah.
And then there are guys on the other side that are like, come in, give me 30 songs. 2 of them are okay. And we're going to rewrite 50% of each of those 2. And that's what you get. And then there's a lot of people that are in between. So it's interesting because Will gives you a lot of that. And that's is that kind of how what you were hoping to get out of it, I guess, when you went in, or did you not know what to expect, really?
I didn't fully know what to expect, but I definitely was hoping that he would take the songs and make them better. And
right.
He definitely did.
I guess that's the goal. Yeah.
He we sat with each song and talked about structure. We took parts out. We moved things around. Like I said, he wrote vocal melodies and even a couple like riffs, and a lot of like the backing like melodies that are the background stuff was stuff that he came up with. Like all that stuff was just, that's what I want. Like, I want another mind involved. And especially like someone like him, it's easy to trust because he's proven, at least in my mind. I'm like,
right.
Even if I'm like not totally sure, I'm okay kind of like letting go and being like, okay, yeah, like if you really think that strongly, like, let's do it. And and I guess when I say traditional producer, that's what I'm thinking. I guess I'm like hearkening back to the 70s or something, when it was more normal for producers to be like writers, almost he's like almost in the band, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's very true. Is like you mentioned, and you came correct with one of our favorite buzzwords on the show, which is that element of trust, right? Regardless of like what role was going to be played, like in a nuance for, sense from song to song, there was hey, I trust you. I'll run with you on this. Let's chase this idea. I'll let you chase this idea. As opposed to saying, no. I really like how this is. Please don't hurt it. Please don't touch it. And like kind of staying guarded. And I think that's a huge merit. And that's how you get those wins. Even if you end up pushing back on certain ideas for whatever reason, you have to be open enough to let someone like Will, who's really good at it and comes with some great ideas, at least offer those suggestions and see how you feel about it. And coming with that openness, I think, is probably what, a crucial part of the EP turning out how it did. How long did it take for you to finish up the tracking? Was it all in one shot right there? Or?
Yeah, I actually had to go do a little like digging today so that I knew the answer to this, because I figured it would come up. But I think we spent 7 or 8 days, maybe 10 days in the first session. We did it in 2 different sessions. So we did December of 2021, and then we got all the basic tracking done and like the foundation for the vocals. And then we didn't come back to finish it until December of the following year of 2022. So it was like what felt like a very long time. But like I said, I was working, like I was so busy, like and we didn't have a set timeline. So that was what was so great about the project, was that no one was waiting on it for any reason other than we wanted to get it done. So it was nice to not feel the pressure of like, outside of just like being excited about it, like it was able to kind of go through the process that it needed to get done. So we did the second round of tracking in December of 2021. And then I think he had it mixed by like May, and then it released in September of 2022. So it was a bit of a process. Yeah.
Yeah. What a wonderful period too. That is, and maybe describe that feeling too while you're waiting. Cause again, it's not like, you have a label, a fan base waiting on it that you obviously have people that are a fan of the music. Right. But if you hadn't announced anything yet.
Nobody was like waiting. Like, we can be real. Like,
But there wasn't like a lot of times, like if you have like a touring schedule lined up, it's like a lot of times like, oh, it's got to fit into this timeline for,
no
whatever.
pressure. Yeah.
But it allowed you, it allowed you all to like to sit back and just have that feeling. And this is my favorite. I love it. And it makes me, when I think about it and try to embody it, like feel like a kid again when when you get those like first song where you're like, oh my God, we made a real record. I can't wait for people to hear this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's kind of that excitement that you're describing that you had kind of, because it took a little while to sew it together, where you're just sitting on it. Actually, funny enough, I always seem to go back to this. I think it's a quote from Jeff Rickley from Thursday, talking about how like that's the period pre-release where it's like that's the only real time where the record is yours, and then the second it's out, it's no longer really yours anymore. It's everybody else's. It's for them to digest, use as they want, where they want, formulate their opinions about it, and it becomes a new chapter in it.
Totally.
What you're describing is that kind of period, and I love it because it's everything about the reasons and authenticity that you were describing of wanting to make music and wanting to press the gas on this project.
Yeah, it's definitely the best part for sure, because you don't have any of the other outliers like coming into your brain once it's out there.
Yeah,
for sure.
You can just be proud and fulfilled.
How did you get linked up with Ben Walsh? Played drums on the record, right?
Yes, that's correct. I think him and Will are old homies. I think from doing many records, and for a long time it was a conversation of like, who's going to play drums on it? Because I think initially he had planned on playing drums on it, but he ended up having some carpal tunnel issues and getting a surgery, and he couldn't play, and so it was like, I feel like it was even like up to like a couple of weeks before we didn't have like. I think he just knew it was going to work out, but we didn't know who it was going to be. He had mentioned Ben a handful of times, which was an exciting prospect for Jason and I. And I think it worked out. Ben came in for like 2 days, I think, and we tracked all the drums for it. So basically Will and I scratched out guitars and vocals once we finished the pre-production of all the songs, and Ben came in and basically listened to the songs once or twice, and then went out into the drum room and started playing. And we'd kind of tell him what we wanted, and Will would tell him where to do fills, and we tracked everything separately, which was really cool. Like, I've always heard about albums like that, like Songs for the Deaf, where they did all the drums separate and like pieced them together in the mix. And I always a little skeptical of it, but man, it was so cool to watch that unfold. And also, like, Ben was just like an incredible player, and obviously an all-around great musician and guy. So having him come into the studio was just like, it felt really nice. But yeah, it only took him like a day, maybe a day and a half. I was trying to remember. But the drums were done quickly.
What was that, during the first session or the second session?
Yeah, that was the first session. So the first session,
cool.
we chose the songs, we did pre-production on them. Ben came in, tracked the drums, and then Jason cut the bass. I started guitars, and then did like all of like the vocals for it, which like for me was the most like illuminating part of the whole session, because like playing guitar is like, that's my like safe space. Like you can put me on a track and I'm the most comfortable there than anywhere. Like, that part for me is so easy. Like, I've done it for so many years. I love doing it. Like, I have no fears around it. But singing is something that like I'm very new to, and I think that's something we're working with Will was really great, because I'm sure you guys know, he's like a great vocal coach, and he really cares about the vocals, and in ways that I never did before. I've just always been really lazy about it, I think, because I've never been a singer in anything, and I just like, that take was good. Like, I'll just double it or triple it and it'll sound fine. And I don't really care.
Until it's acceptable. Right.
Yeah. Like, and I don't really like auto tune them or anything. Like, I've just never been, I think, mostly just lazy, and a little bit kind of like not wanting to put in the extra work to make them what they could be. So for me, when I started like singing with him, it was very eye opening, and he just taught me things like, like, what's like, think about the note that you want to sing. And sometimes he would hear, I mean, he has incredible ears, which is another great thing about him that I want to talk about, is just like how fast he is in his studio. And I like to work quickly in the studio as well. So it's like,
Yeah.
I like appreciated that he did not labor over tones, because he has incredible ears. He knows his studio, he knows his equipment, like, happen fast. And I think if you have those components and a good player, like, you don't have to stress over those things. But vocally, he didn't have a great singer on his hands. so I, that part, like, he would say, no, you missed the note. And I'm like, no, I didn't. He's like, no, it's this. And I'd be like, that's what I'm doing. Like, I swear he has like superhuman hearing, because I can't hear this shit. And I'm pretty damn good at hearing, like, when things are off or on. And I don't know. I appreciated like that push, and someone like helping me do the extra work to make it stronger and better, because it's certainly something that I've never felt that comfortable with. But I love that, he made me sing things a lot in order to get them into a place that was like how they sound. And I think they sound great on the record, and I'm really proud of them. I do suspect there's some tuning going on with them, which I'm totally fine with, but I think overall, like, the bass performances were really good, and it's because of him, like, fully.
Dude, that is such an illuminating way of setting that scene, and especially for a lot of vocalists, I think, especially nowadays, where it's like people will sit in their bedroom and kind of like, okay, I'm humming a little melody, and does it sound good? Wait until everybody's left the house to try to actually like do a take full bore or whatever.
Yeah, it's the worst. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, and what's interesting is that's really where things can go off the rails if you have someone that doesn't know how to work with a singer really well, and or has a singer that's, not willing to like put themselves out there, because that is the most telling time in tracking a record. You can get away if you need to with a lot of other stuff and, some trickery, some surgical editing on some certain things to inject stuff. But that is the one place, especially on a record like this one, that you really need to know that someone felt comfortable enough to go for it. And this is the thing with talking about a conventional producer relationship, or just extending that trust to go work with somebody else, is I think your threshold for quality taste is challenged in different ways. And that's how we grow as musicians, as recording artists, performers, whatever it might be. And I think that's why I think a lot of younger artists, it's very easy to say, okay, well, I guess I can learn to just do this all myself and save a bunch of money, and I have as much time as I want at home. And there's a reality to that. But I think what you're missing out on is the true value of things like that. Having someone that can hear so distinctly those little nuances that you might not hear, that aren't put on your radar, right? We were just doing an episode talking about mastering. So many of like the guys, that are like in the late stages of their career and have like, seemingly hearing that should not be there, or is not what it once was, but are still so rehearsed and good and experienced at listening critically to music and audio. And in this case, that's what you have with producers or guys like that are so used to listening critically to vocal performances and knowing how good they could be, right? That threshold for quality is something that you really can take away. And I hope, I wish more artists, especially if they have great songs, would try to extend the resources to make those relationships happen, if possible, a little earlier on, not for just the sonic, to get a better song, to get a better recording, but to learn more about yourself and challenge yourself in that way. That's awesome, dude. I'm so glad you brought that to light, because I think, the record sounds great. The vocals sound great, the melodies sound great, and that's, but it took two. It wasn't just you in your bedroom to get it there, and I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, no, that there's so much that I'll just let slide that he was not having any of. And you talk about comfort, and it was like we did all of our tracking in the control room together. Like, I was never in the live room, and so it's just like me and him, and I'm there like screaming these songs. So I never felt uncomfortable. I mean, he really did a good job of making sure that his artist was like felt confident and good, and making me redo things never made me feel like I just like wasn't good or couldn't do it. It was always like a positive, like we could be laughing about it or something. Like it just always felt good. So it's priceless, like having that for me, because like I try to do demos now and I just fall back into my own ways. I definitely sing them much stronger, but I still, I don't push myself quite to where like, I think he would be pushing me when I record my demos, especially because they're demos, but,
yeah, of course,
but it's definitely a learning experience.
And I think what's so telling about that, and I think maybe a great way to to wrap all of this up in what you've kind of laid out is what you just said about the experience that you had doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds incredible. I know, having worked with Will and knowing Will for so long, he's such an incredible vibe curator, as I'll call him, in the studio and that space, making sure it's positive and it keeps a positive, really, open momentum. And he's always looking out for everybody else, to stay open-minded and
so
stay
important.
excited about what's happening. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it is, right. And that's also something that I think you can get by going outside of your comfort zone to work with somebody else, another engineer, another producer, whatever it might be in that world, because at the end of the day, the reason what brought you here, and like you said, after getting burned out, having worked on so many other projects over the years, the experience that you have making this stuff is something that will actually that becomes way more important than maybe we realize early on, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that's and I think that's something that working with somebody else and extending some of that, the labor or stress in terms of like, now I got to sing and engineer and edit and all this stuff. By the time you get to the end, you're like, I just don't want to ever hear the song again.
Yeah.
And that's not really what happened here.
Yeah. Like I said, it is a dream come true to go into the studio with him and do that. I truly thought that those days were most likely over for me. And so not a day goes by I don't count that blessing, like that I was able to do, even if this was the last like JR Slayer recording I ever did, it would have been a nice way to go out, because it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I just feel very, very grateful.
I have a feeling it will not be for that reason, but yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Cody, what's next? What's for both you and JR Slayer?
Yeah, so next year I'll definitely go back to work and try to like balancing the band and the work a little bit more than just band only. That's definitely not a framework that I think is going to work for me. But we're writing. I mean, I have tons of new material. We started playing with a drummer, this guy Alex Anyate, and so him and Jason and I have actually been writing together, which is a dream of mine, because I want a band to sound like a band. I want to create a sound so it can feel unique and hopefully make something a little special to us for the next thing that we do. So yeah, and hopefully get back into the studio with Will sooner than later.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to the next evolution of JR Slayer. That all sounds very exciting.
Hell yeah.
And we very much appreciate you unpacking this one. It's a great EP. Go listen to it. Where can everybody else find you if they want to keep up with everything you're doing and just get any other insight on the project? And
I guess we have like a Bandcamp, like JR Slayer Bandcamp. Our Instagram is JR Slayer Jams. You can find it there. I don't know, Spotify, whatever your platform is. We're easy to find.
Anywhere music is streamed, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You got it. Well, and all that stuff is, as always, will be in the show notes to go check it out and have a better appreciation. Go if this is your first time going into the EP. But it sounds great, man, and we thoroughly appreciate you taking the time here. Yeah.
Yeah, this was awesome. I appreciate you guys.
Man, Cody's such a good dude, and I am so happy to see him feeling so passionate and so fulfilled with the music that he's making with this project. If you haven't already, go check it out. There were a lot of really talented people involved in the making of it. I wanted to reach back to something that we talked about at the beginning of the episode when Cody was kind of talking about his origin story and coming up with the Blood Brothers. As artists and as creatives, I think a lot of our energy and focus gets put into reaching for the next plateau, right? Reaching for the next big milestone, whether that be streaming or ticket sales. But rarely do we think about these things in the context of long-term fiscal stability. This is something that's really important, not just in making a living 100% from music, but in allowing your future self the capacity and resources to find that mental bandwidth, to think deeply about the music you're creating, and to continue making it from a place of personal fulfillment and authenticity. Because as the story of this EP reminded us, that's ultimately how you position yourself as an artist to continue making music that speaks to the truth of your experience and also resonates deeply with the audience listening to it, whether it be 10 days from now or 10 years from now. So remember, the race as a music maker is long. Don't get ahead of yourself. Keep focusing on staying inspired along the way. And thank you again for taking a quick detour with us right here on
The Record Process.